So I'm calling this the Ultimate Demo Review, not because I'm reviewing Ultimate, but because this is possibly his best game ever. And if you want to be cynical, Liquid probably just went on HLTV and were like, what's the player that got the most kills in their most recent game? Ultimate got 45 plus kills in this game. We need that guy. Okay, that's probably not what they said, but this player is, in theory, a bit of a gamble for Liquid. Liquid seems to have made several gambles in their current roster construction. And that was, yeah, I think he just ended up shooting between the two heads there, which I think we could all sympathize with. When you have two people on your screen, you just end up shooting between them. But, I mean, you can even see by the way he played that round that it looks like his team is setting him up pretty well. And that was one of the concerns I had when OC joined Liquid, that it just felt like Liquid, I mean, to some extent you have to be self-sufficient, but to another extent, you know, you need your team to set you up a little bit as an opper, and I didn't think OC got much of a chance with that. We'll see how that actually continues for Ultimate. I'll watch a few rifle rounds, but I want to mostly look at his op rounds in this game, because that's what we're hoping he does mostly on Liquid. Anyways, begins with the early cat control, just willing to get a kill and fall off, and then he's going to help his team try and support them in towards mid here. The reason he's mid most likely is because Furlan is already hit for 95, so their B-hold is going to be terrible, and oh my god, Kazu. So one of his main goals here is he needs to not die so that they can have like a solid retake on A, because they don't have a ton of utility. That was hard to watch. Okay. But yeah, he just plays the slow retake. I mean, he doesn't have much other choice here because his team died car. Like, if his teammate hadn't died, then I think he could have gone a little more aggressive. And then, man, he just taps them away. That's very nice aim. Very solid. Absolutely nothing to complain about with the way he played that round. His teammate, on the other hand, that was rough. All right. First gun round, in theory, the double lower tons push. People are starting to love this, and they're actually going to get aggressive with it. Furlan's going to lead. Ultimate's going to be here for the trade. And again, he's just... I mean, he's not making his shots hard for himself. You know what I mean? Like, his crosshair position is fairly wide, right? Just making it easy for people to walk into his crosshair to some extent. And man, he would have just mowed them down if his teammate had just landed that nade. All right, that molly, by the way, lands in the air. So some tough utility being thrown by the entirety of Illuminar here. So this is Illuminar versus Bait B8, by the way, if you weren't already aware. And the player peeks off of platform, and you really can't blame. You can't blame Ultimate for that. His teammates traded, which is essentially, if you're in that spot and someone peeks you off plat and you have your team where they were, you're pretty much expecting they should be trading anyways, so it's not the biggest deal. Scout on round 4. His team is going for a buy, but they don't have a ton of money, which is kind of how it worked, because on second round they lost a few too many players. And I see a lot of people are very happy scouting on CT side does too, and you can get a lot done, especially against that, because so many people are going for that. I feel like a major part of the reason people are happy to go for the scout on second round is because you kind of just gamble that you're going to be hitting that shot. Oh, how does he not kill him there? What? How does he not? What? That is an insane spam. That is insane. How does he not kill him? What? What? Oh, it was the wall. Oh my, okay, the guy was in lower tunnels. All right, okay. That is wild, dude, Jesus. All right. 3v2, they could consider aggressing into tons, but you have a CZ and a scout, which is about the worst possible two guns that in terms of like considering even a little bit pushing into tunnels. Like, you're just so screwed in that spot. So you really do have to hope things go well. Kazu gets a kill on Cat, and that means they're actually going to be able to pivot over and pick up the guns, right? Because there's some guns down in middle, and they should both be able to upgrade unless the T actually threw the guns away. No, he's good. Probably should have reloaded here. He's got 8 bullets, but actually I guess that doesn't even matter if PHR is just gonna do it himself. So, I mean, well played round by Ultimate. He gets the one kill that he's offered, almost gets a second, and then plays out the rest of the round really effectively, right? So nothing so far from Ultimate that you could ask him to do more. And he's not really been, it's not that he's opting out of an op, right? We're round 5, he doesn't have an op yet. But just the way the economy works, you don't want to force an op if you don't need one. A lot of the time you're going to be buying an op, you know, if you lose a round or if you end up dying and you have lots of money, that type of thing. Some teams will try and force the op, but just the way this game has gone with the, a lot of teams, in the last demo I reviewed, Astralis did the same thing where they bought like 5 M4s on round 2, and that just kind of, it essentially puts you in a situation where you're probably not going to be able to get an op on the first gun round. So the teams are just willing to do that if they win pistol. The aggression in mid, this does mean that he's like very comfortable with rifles, which is always something you like to see. You know, there is like, you don't want to be too, you don't want to have people, not that, there's nothing wrong with Zaiwu buying rifles a lot, but you do want your opper to be an opper, right? There's a difference between an opper and a rifler. And the thing, you know, your opper does certain things for you that you want them to do. So you want your opper to be comfortable with rifles, right? You don't want like, I think JDM was always someone that really struggled with rifles. And usually if you struggle with rifles, you can be a great opper, but you just struggle to actually maintain your rating in that case. You want your opper to be comfortable with rifles, but you don't want him to be over prioritizing rifles because he's uncomfortable with the op. And I don't think that's really the case with Ultimate. With those two flashes, so those two flashes, I've talked about this a lot. It's nice to throw flashes like that because it delays the setup. So if we look at like the T's, right, it's going to delay their setup into getting into good positions because they're blind. I mean, it looks like Kurtka actually even got confused because he tried to run into the corner there, maybe thinking he had the bomb. It just makes the T's like uncomfortable setting up into positions. They can't comfortably get into the spots they want to be. You can see Essential. He might have been big box looking window otherwise. However, he probably could have saved the second flash, like, because they're so delayed. They're a full several seconds behind that second flash. But I think what Ultimate is thinking there is that they're going to run straight in. But his teammate actually, PHR, just takes that extra second to like clear things instead of directly running into the bomb site. So it's just kind of like a bit of a disconnect, I think, between the two ways they're thinking of playing it. And neither of them is necessarily wrong. I think they're just not quite on the same page. Maybe he could have delayed it for like half a second longer, but yeah. All right, so making his way up Cat. He's going to end up nading lower, which ends up being almost perfect, actually. I think he hits Alex for 90 damage, and he throws it a bit earlier than most people will throw it. I think specifically because his teammate made contact in lower, and he's expecting them to push quickly past it. But his team is just falling apart. So I actually really like this play. So I've talked about this in reviews before. You lose a few players, you can gamble off of B. Look, if they go out B right now, fuck it, you lose the round. You're going to lose anyways. You're 3v4. It's CT side dust 2. You need a lot of money, like a surprising amount of money to win on CT side dust 2. You really want an op if you can get one. So you may as well gamble in these types of situations. And going out mid in this spot for T's makes a lot of sense. So he's going to call his B player over to mid. And his A player actually also, Kazu, is going to come with him. I really like this idea. Kazu can throw a flash and then pivot right back to A, right? And he's going to go out. His B player is a bit late. So I don't like the timing. The only problem I have with this actually is the timing. Because Ultimate, this is a coordinated plan, right? They're going together. And that's great. But look where Ultimate is and look where Bielani, let's say Bielani. There's no way for him to trade, right? So it's just, they're a little bit disconnected. If Ultimate took an extra couple seconds here, he would be in a much better position to actually get traded. Now, he does actually just straight up bait NPL into the swing, but if he doesn't get that kill because he's so much further ahead of his teammate than he probably should be, he actually should have died there and it would have been tough to get the trade. And not only that, but it would have given his teammate, like, so what happens is he dies here, and then this scout goes, okay, where's the trade? He peeks out, and then his teammate dies too instead of getting the trade because of that gap between potentially him dying and the trade swinging, which isn't his teammate's fault. I think that's on, well, maybe his teammate could have been there faster, but he also could have waited, I think. Here, this is another one that's a little bit odd because you see this T is walking up long. And I think Ultimate really wants to be in this position. I think this position from Ultimate makes a lot of sense, but the problem is they're looking at the same spot. And the reason I like this position from Ultimate is because he's got 14 health, and this is a really unexpected position. But I think if he's going to play here, Kadziu should be peeking out and checking this direction a little bit. And Kadziu can play off of contact a little bit, right? Kadziu's made some presence. He could be kind of peeking out this way, just checking, because he's safe if he's here, right? He's safe from Cat, just checking this way a little bit, and then if he spots someone, Ultimate could stand up and kill him. But instead, Kadziu is fully dedicated to dealing with Cat, and neither of them is looking long. Although there's an argument, of course, that, you know, Ultimate could be looking long instead of Cat. There's also an argument that maybe sometimes in this situation, especially because they saw so many players in middle, that you could just gamble that they're not going long. But I think you could gamble that they're not going long, mostly focus Cat, but still kind of check long a little bit, just like double check it once in a while. And they wouldn't really have lost anything if they did that. But again, that one is not on Ultimate, I think, at all. I think Ultimate just made a decision there that we're going to gamble not long. And I think it's Kadziu that maybe from like the coach, if he's there, right? The coach could have potentially said like, hey, Kadziu, just double check long once in a while. I feel like that would have made a lot of sense, or the IGL could have called it or something. Again, he's going to have a rifle. Again, they're going to get aggressive up Cat. So he definitely is kind of in the... I saw Thorin talk about this before. There's entry fraggers and there's playmakers, right? And Ultimate's not... I mean, there's really no clear entry fragging on CT, but he's kind of in a playmaker position. He's going for those aggressive plays. He's in position to get kills, and he's delivering. Basically every single time he's delivering, which I really like. The rotate over, very risky play, but I don't think that's on him even necessarily. That is a sick shot that he just hit on Alex. Oh my god, he just dinked him there. Wow. Okay. That's a really clean shot. I mean, that was a risk, but even if it was his decision, it's not like a bad play. It's just a risky play. And sometimes you do, again, sometimes you just have to take risks, right? I think sometimes you get too caught up in the idea of like, this happened a lot when like Astralis was on top. People were like, we can't take any risks. And it's like, no, you need to take calculated risks, right? Take risks when it's a good idea to be taking those risks. And that was a pretty solid spot to take those risks because his teammates were long without long control. So this time he's going to go for the lower tons play. He actually cancels to make his way up. Man, let's just skip this round. This game goes into overtime, so we don't need to see everything. I want to see him get an op. They're going for the same play over and over and over up mid here. Please, can we see him? Thank you. Okay, he's got an op, and he's got the spawn too. He's got the best spawn. They haven't had an op all game long. I'm really surprised he doesn't just go straight. His teammate misses the jump. Oh, God. Oh, God. Someone said, by the way, G will make your cursor disappear. That worked in CSGO, but CS2 is glitched, and it has been for like a month now. Your cursor only disappears when you move. It's really messed up. His teammate straight up misses, straight up misses the jump. Oh, boy. That sucks. I'm surprised he didn't go for the long peek because this is the first op they've had so far in this game. Boy. That flash really hung for a long time. This isn't like a big mistake, but I think, you know, if you look at like, if you have Monacy playing this angle, he is going to dodge this flash, I think, every time. He's dodging this flash every time. Because you can just... Oh, actually, he didn't really see it. Okay, sorry. I thought it hung a lot longer. I think he didn't really see it. Like, if we look at it without the trail... Yeah, that is actually a really nice flash. Okay, my bad. With the trail, it looks like he saw it the whole time, and I was like, yeah, Monacy's just going to unpeak and dodge that every single time. But in that case, like, yeah, that is actually a really, really clean flash. I'll show you guys this flash in case you wanted to see it, because it is actually cool. All right, so he gets here, clears this a little bit, and then, yeah, just not even too specifically, it doesn't look like. But that is a clean flash. That works flawlessly. Again, I'm kind of surprised he just didn't go for the long play. We're round 10 when he buys the first op, and he's got the best spawn. It's most likely not his call, of course, but it is, you know, a play I would have expected him to go for. In any case, The aggression in long is wild, by the way. This is wild to re-aggress like this because they already know someone's out long. This type of re-aggression is somewhat normal if they're not out long. Like if they're not in pit yet, right? What I mean is that re-aggression makes some sense. Like people will go for that if you don't know if they're out long yet. So your opponents might not even be in long and you can retake it and you can kind of catch them as they run outdoors. But it's a little less common in the case that, you know your opponents are out long, you see that molly car, right? And I think Ultimate is just expecting that Kadziu had been covering, like would know if there was someone in pit, so he's going for the reaggress thinking, okay, nobody's in pit, but somebody is in pit. And the re-peek is a little, let's say, confident. It's aggressive. Given that they had already mollied car, I do feel like he could have just not re-peek. He could have just held. Do they really have a second player with another molly in pit? But the problem if you don't re-peek is that they might call another player over, and then you have two people holding your angle. And if you already knew Kadziu was lit on a plat, but also especially because Kadziu has had a FAMAS, Kadziu can't really cover him very well. He can't call for a rotate back over. So I can absolutely see why he went for what he went. But one of the other options, some people might like toss a smoke down here just to give them, usually you would do this with the rifle, but it gives you a little bit of a different angle, and then you can like jump on the car and kind of fight over here, and some people will do that. But I think that's a play you usually see people do with a rifle. I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong with what he did there, but he could have hid, and that would have been like, what I mean to say is he's taking the more aggressive of the options. That doesn't mean it's necessarily a bad idea. But it is the more aggressive of the options, right? And especially if you're going on a team like Liquid, I think one of the things that, other oppers like OC specifically, but I'm thinking kind of like Junior when he was on Furia as well, where like a tier 2, tier 3 opper will join a tier 1 team, and if they're just not the most aggressive player of all time, they need to be able to advocate for themselves, you know what I mean? Like, okay, they really need to be able to advocate for themselves. And so if you have an aggressive player like that, then you're expecting that he's going to be willing to advocate for himself. So nice little angle from NPL. Ultimate is doing what I like this play from Ultimate. He's just looking for the T, right? Because in this situation, you have no idea where the T is. I think they know he's trapped right side, so they really just need to find him here. And he's trusting his teammate to trade, right? And I like everything he did there. Maybe if they know he's trapped right side, he could just he could clear this a little. He could like jiggle this or hard clear it or something. But at that point, you're really just nitpicking. Maybe there's a slightly better way for him to play that, but at the same time, he did everything kind of right up until that point, and it was like he's not going to get punished for that jump spot almost ever, right? So he does have some versatility in where he's opening with the op. He's now going for the Tons Peak, which is very solid, and one of the things this does, so when I talk about like players getting more resources, I was on Feed the Trolls with Thorin and Tech Girl, and I talked about, I think sometimes roles are overstated, like the position you actually play, but the resources you get it's hard for players to adapt if they play on a team where they get less resources. And what I mean by that is this type of thing. So if you're a B player on Dust 2 and you want to play aggressive, the resources aren't just, I don't know why I clap. Your resources aren't just like, oh, I throw a flash for you, right? It's not like having your teammates throw utility for you or bait for you. It is, if you want to play aggressive B on Dust 2, you need to have a second player there with you sometimes, and you need to have your opper cover sometimes, because otherwise the opposing opper can just walk in on you, right? And so when you see players like Nexa, for example, or I'm trying to think of other like really passive players, but Nex is a good example because like he gets no resources in a lot of the positions he plays, which means he has no protection against the way the opponents want to deal with him. So he's really kind of left in this horrible position where his opponents can play however they want and know they're almost always running into only one player. And if you look at like a player like Heavy God, for example, right, I believe Nexa plays Aeon Anubis, Heavy God plays Aeon Anubis. he'll have like a second. That is a nice fucking shot. He'll have a second player with him be. He can spam him here, but if the guy's 100 health, he's fucked. Yeah, there's nothing he really could have done there. Spamming there is like. You almost feel the need to spam, but at the same time, if you start spamming, he's just gonna peek you and you've got 20 health and you're fucked. This is really well done, man. Ultimate, at least in this game, man, Ultimate seems like a fucking good player. But yeah, A on Anubis, like you have Heavy God. His Opper starts A with him like almost half of rounds. And that shuts down a lot of what the T's might be trying to do, because if they know Heavy God loves to play aggressive, they might just kind of walk in to trade and explode on the bomb site. But if you often have an Opper there, then that walk in and explode play no longer works out very effectively. And the same thing goes for having a second player play there. That's the resources I'm talking about when I say players get more resources. And not only that, but like with OG, they literally they play passive in middle, right? They play super passive in middle. And you can't play aggressive on the whole map because the whole map can't get resources to afford to play aggressive without basically often throwing the round. And that really plays into it as well. Okay, so if you watch my device review, they had 2 flashes. In this case, we have 1 flash and no smoke. Okay, they threw the smoke already. That was just confusing. But they have the P250. And the P250 can be hit or miss, but you can see the CTs. If you're a CT on plat, I think this is not one-shot headshot range. Here definitely is not, which means the P250 actually has a massive advantage because he's going to one-shot you in the head and you're not going to one-shot him. And if he gets dinked, he can just back up and cancel, and it's not the end of the world, right? So you do have a massive advantage with the P250. I generally feel like I prefer the P250 over 2 flashes, but I can definitely see, someone in the comments said he prefers the flash. I think I can see both arguments, absolutely. But you need to have a player here with good aim. Like Shiro, oh damn. I was going to say like Shiro in that position really delivers heavily. You know what I mean? Shiro really does really well. And just because you're an Opper doesn't mean you're necessarily going to be great with the P250. It's kind of like the Scout. To some extent, like sometimes you have riflers that are better with the Scout than Oppers because the Scout actually zooms in less than the Op. It's like 20% or 30% less zoomed, which actually I remember when I was consistently opping and I would pick up the Scout, it felt so weird. And at the time, I never really understood why it felt so weird. And I'm pretty sure the reason the Scout feels weird for Oppers sometimes is because it zooms in so much less, you know? Anyways, he's got the Scout here. They didn't win the round, but they got the bomb plant, so they've got a good situation. And again, it seems like, well, this case, I was about to say it seems like most teams are going for this heavy M4 play on second round, but you've got Bait. They're much more balanced than either of Illuminar or Astralis were in the times I've seen it. This is one of I'm sorry. This is just who I am, okay? You're just gonna have to accept it. This is a cool peak. I've been doing this peak for 12 years now or something. It's the most effective. Uncrouching into an angle is the most effective way to peek anything, basically. At least it has been in CS Source, CSGO, because you kind of uncrouch almost instantly, but your body has an animation. Or at least this is the way I was just explained why it's so good, and it makes a lot of sense. Your body has an animation, so your peeker's advantage is like as high as physically possible, and you're just going to win that fight like 99% of the time. It is unbelievably strong. T-stairs on Inferno. This exact angle on Dust. I'm sure there's lots. Back plat on Dust 2 is not quite as good, by the way. I know you're thinking, back plat on Dust 2? No, because when you uncrouch, there's so many different angles they could be holding that you have to worry about, right? You have to worry about like an off angle. And they're looking right at you because there's only one spot you could really be in. All right, again, he's got an AK. T-side Dust 2, you're not seeing the op quite as much as like CT side. It's a lot of teams on CT side Dust 2 seem to be fully committed on the idea like we need an op all the time. It seems like with the Luminar, that's not quite the case, but that also plays into how good your opper is with a rifle. Because you do lose a lot if you don't have an op, but if your opper's good with a rifle, you can still, make up for it with other things that you're capable of doing. So he's actually going to be the second player out here, which is cool. Usually, I mean, if you're thinking about it, second player out is typically the player that's most likely to get kills. And you can do that with your Opera especially. Like some Operas, if you're a bad rifler, I feel like if you're a bad rifler as an Opera, the odds of you going first out are higher. Like if I'm playing with JDM, who's like not a great rifler, then you know what I'm thinking? I'm thinking send him out first, we'll trade on him, you know? But if you got Ultimate, who's like, a lot of Operas now are like really good in the clutch, right? So even with rifles, you can be comfortable. You just like, you let them survive. You let them survive a little bit. So he goes out, his teammate dies. I kind of wish he went up with his teammate. He's playing this like an op, which is cool, but what happens when this guy dies? Now his team has 2 players in B, and if Alex doesn't just hard whiff there, they're kind of completely fucked. They're kind of like, there should be no way they win this. Now, if he had a flash, I would like this a lot more, because you hold it for a little while, and then you're in a great spot to toss a flash over. But with no flash, it just feels like it would be risky, right? It's obviously risky for him to run up there. But if his opponents don't go through the smoke, which they don't here, then his team should just almost universally lose if he doesn't help them. Yeah. The peak on NPL, he was a little late on the peak, which kind of screwed him, but he recovered for it. And sometimes you're just going to be late on that peak. You're expecting NPL to like clear out mid a little bit and actually take his time, because you're generally, when you go for the retake, you're kind of expecting a second player, like a player to be there. But because the CTs have already gotten a kill in middle, they're thinking, okay, well, he might not be playing that position because his teammate died, right? Which would make sense for him to potentially not play that spot. And he was playing that spot, so he caught him off guard completely. All right, so we got the op back. Does he hit the shot? Some people are like savants at hitting that shot, and some people definitely really struggle. And it does actually make a pretty big difference just in, like, the CT teams, they're not going to be smoking the cross if they don't need to, right? And it does actually make your B takes a little harder if your opponents have an extra smoke, you know what I mean? Even though it seems like a small thing, but if you're hitting that shot consistently, then the other team is more likely to be smoking cross more often. Interesting, I think Bait are just going to full save here 4v5. And we saw... Yeah, Ultimate's thinking about it. He does get tagged there by... Oh, I thought it was an op. He gets tagged by a scout. Once you get tagged once, then you're like, yep, my ability to fight that scout is now 0. So I think he had one of the best spawns. I think he had the best spawn here. Lots of teams love to cross when they have the best spawn. It just makes a lot of sense. Again, it's kind of like protecting the potential plays that your B-Tons player can make. By going there, you make the CTs a little bit less likely to want to just straight up rifle versus rifle duel. Like if you look at the way Spirit do this, sometimes they'll have the double rifle duel. They'll have a guy here and they'll have a guy down in front, and they'll be just dueling. And if the T rifler that defaults in tunnels, if he tries to peek, he's just going to end up dying. But if sometimes you send the opera to cross, like Ultimate did there, then you kind of protect that player. You disincentivize the counter to your standard B-Tons player's play, right? They have been kind of discovered here. It's kind of obvious that they're going up long here because the CTs have controlled so much of the map. The CTs had really good timing on when they actually re-aggressed into tunnels. They kind of like followed Illuminar as they left tons. I like this play here. I just wanted to highlight it. So his team starts dying on plat. One thing you could see, by the way, is you can actually throw flashes like up here, high and behind. In Pugs, I highly recommend this, where you tell your team, I'm flashing high behind, and you have them land here, which just blinds a lot of these angles and just makes it a little bit easier for your team. But I like this play where his team, this is the exact flash I'm talking about. Maybe he could have thrown that early, but I think in that case they had 4 people crossing. He's trying to save it for the after plant, and that's like a team strategical decision. I think if his team wanted him throwing that, they would have him throw that. I feel like some teams have their opera throw that and some teams don't. But as soon as things go wrong, okay. So his spray control might not be perfect. I was going to say, one of the things I like there, though, is when the take started going wrong, he immediately reacted, you know? He didn't do kind of like the the baity opper play, which is to like stay kind of like you move a little bit forward, you like move up to here, you throw the flash, then you kind of like, oh well, I gotta check the flank before I move up, and then all of a sudden the round's over and you never actually made it there. You know, things start going wrong and he makes his way quickly up the car, doesn't find an excuse to be looking the other direction. I think he just spammed cross again, by the way, and didn't hit the guy again, which sucks. It's unfortunate, but it is what it is. He's actually going to trade out for the rifle. Okay. I can see the idea behind this. So he doesn't want to stay in tunnels, because if he stays in tunnels, it's easy for him to get cut off. And if he gets cut off, then Kazu isn't going to have time to activate his flank, right? Because if the CTs all came from outside B, just smoked off tunnels, and he got cut off, then it's like a 4v2, and then they're in kind of a rough spot. So he wants to make sure that he can be in a position where he doesn't get cut off and he can actually activate. However, the standard is definitely to have him in tunnels, and I don't know. Why don't you guys tell me, because I'm actually interested in what you guys think of this play. I can absolutely see the logic behind it, and the logic actually makes a lot of sense, but should he, especially since he has a smoke, he can re-smoke doors. What if they just flood in from outside B with like 2 really good flashes, especially because they took B site really early, right? So the CTs have a good amount of utility. You know, it is... Oh, maybe he was thinking Kazu was going to be able to block the lower rotate. But Kazu... I feel like I see a lot of miscommunication. I actually feel like this might be the idea, is that Kazu can block the lower rotate, so Ultimate can be in a spot like this, and he can re-smoke doors very safely. And he could even, potentially, smoke off tunnels if he wanted. That would be sick right now, dude. Oh my god. If Kazu is like, oh, they could be tunnels, right? And obviously, they could be tunnels, and he re-smokes tons, that would be crazy. But I guess that's kind of like, hindsight is 20/20, right? That's outcome-oriented thinking, because if they didn't have 2 players in tunnels, if they're just waiting out the doors smoke, then you actually just get completely screwed if you wait for that. If you smoke tunnels instead of doors. I guess it's a bit of like a gamble there. I'm interested though. He might have. It's possible. I feel like that he thought Kazu would lock down that lower tons rotate, so he moved out, and then Kazu's like, oh, they could come from tons, and he's like, oh well, I could have been more ready for that. But maybe he just wanted to play more together with his team. That also makes sense. Sometimes you do get a little bit isolated as that tons player, and if he dies, then again, if he gets isolated as the tons player, it's so easy for them to convert the round, because Kazu's going to take a long time to actually activate. So it's an interesting situation here. Leading up Cat, I like this play. You're going to catch someone if they try and jiggle this angle. You might even catch them if they try and swing with a flash, or swing without a flash. That was a very nice shot though, because he's not expecting that wide of a swing, and the swing does come in, and oi, nice shot. Oh my god, this guy is the ultimate opper in tier 2 CS. So Ultimate, by the way, actually has, I think, 0 games against top 10 opponents, which is kind of crazy. Here, the peek on a head trick, he needs to make that. He absolutely needs to make that, because if he doesn't, then he's just kind of trapped. And even though it's a kill where he should be dying, right? He absolutely, head trick should be killing him there the majority of the time. He has to go for that peek because he needs the space. The peek back, he also, because if the bomb had already been planted, maybe he could have backed up and waited for a teammate. But the natural play, right? The natural play for Opera is like, you already hit a couple nice shots. You're gonna like, I think people say they overheat, but I don't even think that was overheating. There's like, it just makes sense to turn back, especially with the bomb not planted. If the bomb was planted, there's an argument for which play would have been the better play. I think in that case, that was just the standard play. Man, he's hitting some fucking nice shots. But the problem is, you know, I want to see him maybe on a game where he's not just kind of on, right? Because you have your A game, and Ultimate's A game is pretty dynamic. He can obviously rifle and op. He's not letting himself kind of get located and picked off. He's very willing to get aggressive to retake angles, and sometimes it's risky, and maybe teams could try and counter that by, you know, taking like VP style, taking control of areas, holding it and waiting, you know, prompting the re-aggression. But it doesn't seem like he's doing anything crazy. but you know, then you have your B game and your C game, right? If things aren't going well for you, especially if, you know, you're playing against top 10 teams, which Ultimate really hasn't played, at least not in officials, at least not in 2024, and they're going to be using much better flashes. Like one of the things Smooya said when he was in NA, which I'm thinking probably holds true for a lot of tier 2, tier 3 CS in like Europe, and I know it holds true like tier 1. I did an event at some point, a South American event, and it was like, man, they're just not throwing any flashes. And that's what Smooya said. He's like, in NA, I could farm so hard because he carried insanely hard. He was like unbelievably good. He's like, I can farm so hard in NA because they don't throw flashes. So he goes for the long peek. If you watched my Astralis review, then you know what I was talking about, where this peek can get punished if the CTs just don't give him anything, and they didn't give him anything there. They just naded him. Someone could have crossed, but the guy that would have crossed would have been the guy that threw that nade. I think someone could have crossed, but maybe if they throw that nade, can they have crossed? I think still yes, but maybe he would have had to throw it from a different trajectory, because he would have had to throw it on the run, which a lot of people are doing. They throw that molly, they've got a lineup, and they never stop strafing towards pit, and they molly it. I'm sure there's a way to throw that with a nade too. So he's just looking for a player through the top of the smoke. His team is just sitting in long. This is like standard. You expect to see this in matchmaking, where your team takes long and then they just hold long forever, and the CTs eventually pivot over and are like, guys, they're obviously going long. We even have tons control, but they have no real option. Like, they can't go back. So they're kind of trapped here. They're kind of stuck with this one. And in this case, I do think I really would have loved a flash high to the right, because you only have 3 players. In the previous round where he didn't flash high to the right, they had 4 players, and so the flash felt a little bit less necessary. But with 3 players, it would be really nice to have that flash. But I don't know, maybe teams just aren't throwing that anymore. I mean, Ultimate himself threw that. And again, I feel like that might be just like a strategic, like the team decision. It just feels like a situation where I'd want to see a flash high to the right, just to help those 3 players. Because if one of them dies, then it's going to be hard to plant, right? In that situation, especially because they know that the CTs could be stacked over there. They're already watching the flank, right? Anyways, because they've taken long and then just held it so many times, I think they're trying to see if Ultimate can catch someone pushing up mid, because it's obvious from the T perspective that the CTs knew they were coming long, right? They had 3 players completely ready for that take, and then a 4th player was there very quickly afterwards. So it's obvious that the CTs are taking control after the Ts take long. So they're going to send Ultimate there. They're confident, they're confident in his ability to find a kill if he sees someone. And man, that shot he just hit, it's not normally, guys. No. When he's having an on game like this is an A game, right? He's hitting every shot, he's going to hit that. But that's one of those shots that if he's like having an off day, that shot is unnecessarily hard, I feel like, compared to how easy it could be if he's just like fully ready for that instead of like trying to run, like save some time, it felt like. Anyways, flashes to the left. He could have been ready for that. He probably could have been ready for that. He tried to get aggressive with the Tech 9 out instead of the op out. And Kadziu's had some, I feel like, questionable moments, but he's also won a couple really nice clutches, so. All right. So that's the flash for Cat, by the way, if his team was start heading up Cat. And he's very willing to get aggressive, even with like pulling out his Tech 9 to get aggressive as well, to take control. He's like very, I don't want to say unselfish. It feels like it's, he's very aggressive and willing to take some risks. I'd say that for sure. It almost feels like what you have to do if you're opping and face it pugs, which is like, your team isn't going to do it on their own. You need to actually go with them and show them that, I'm going to jump through with the Tech 9, because if I don't go, then nobody else is going to go. So that peek that he did this round, by the way, is the peek that I was saying he could have done last round. He could have been ready for that. But I think maybe in the previous round he was expecting his teammates to have smoked doors, because there was a round earlier in the half where his teammates had smoked doors. Finally hits that shot. There was a round earlier in the game where he peeked that ready for that situation, and his teammates had already smoked doors. So I think in that case, he was expecting his teammates to have smoked doors, and they didn't, so he was kind of unprepared for it. This time he was prepared for it, and that ends up with him getting a kill. He got his teammate bait for him by jumping out, which, you know, even if you're like not necessarily playing around your opper all the time, if your opper's having a good game, I think you can adjust. You can adjust pretty quickly to try and allow him to have as much impact as possible, right? Although one of the things I notice is that, like, when you look at operas at higher and higher levels, they have more quote on games, right? Like games where their aim is really on point. But the problem is that no matter how on point your aim is as an opper, you're not going to be able to activate every single time. You're still going to have games where they just use their utility really effectively, or they avoid you or whatever. And you can try and activate better if you can, but some operas then try and force it because they don't have like their A game happen that often. And when they force it, they actually end up, even though their shots are hitting, they end up kind of peeking into people in unfortunate ways and dying. I don't think that peek on NPL was an example of that. By the way, I think that's kind of like a standard peek. You clear that angle. You know they had a rifler there in that area. It's a fight you're going to be winning almost every time. The only question I would have had in that round is, like, could he have turned around to watch Cat, but instead of running out, because he ran out with his team. But sometimes you just have to run out, because if you turn around to watch Cat and you get blinded and die, then they have an op and your utility and a 2v2. It turns around really badly. So you actually can just abandon Cat, and then in a 3v2 like that, you can play from... play from plat. You have the opera on plat. You have one guy on, you have the opera near goose, and you have one guy on site, and it can actually end up working out really effectively. I've seen lots of teams go for that type of play. And in that case, he was just trying to make sure that, two players, sometimes you can get 2K'd, right? Because if one player dies, then he has no trade, and he has to play a lot more passive. So a third player isn't necessarily... in a push isn't necessarily even there because you need that third player. But what you need is the third player so that your second player can continue going aggressive to ensure he gets like the trade and doesn't have to like turtle up after his first player dies, you know what I mean? Not much to say about this round. I mean, Ultimate put himself in a good spot. Then the problem is he had 14 health there, and there was a guy close doors, and his team had made a lot of noise rotating around, which means that guy was kind of prompted to peek out, but Ultimate with 14 health there is just not going to win that very often, right? All right, so he's going for the B peek. If we remember back to the first half, we were talking about this, and he didn't see anybody, so they didn't really know that he went for that B peek. So going for it again, I mean, even if they knew, it was still a fine way to open up the half. He might be using it as a spawn thing. Does he hit that shot? Did he hit? Okay, I don't think he hit the first shot. This other guy was injured, but it looks like it was an assist. The repeaks are aggressive. Very aggressive. You won't be pushed around. Whatever. Rounders, by the way. Someone asked me what the reference was last time I did that. It's rounders. I almost want to say repeaking an op in pit after missing your first shot might even be... I might even say it's overly aggressive. Wait, does he hit the second shot too? So he hits his first shot, does he hit the second shot too? Okay, he doesn't hit the second shot. All right. Okay, that was going to be crazy if he hit that one. All right, so... Not gonna do. Are they gonna Bogdan's Law? I mean, it's not good to have either player with an op here, really. And if he trades the op to PHR, then actually PHR is gonna have to play more slow, which makes it a little awkward. So I think if Ultimate's confident with the op when you're going for a retake like this, I think it makes sense to have him stay with the op. But I would like to see him. It feels like he needs to be more in a trade situation. but I can see what's happening. They're just expecting a guy to be car. They don't have a molly for car because I think they use the molly for back sight. Let me see. I think they don't have a molly for car because they use the molly for back sight, right? He's got the molly. He mollies back plat. Okay, so that Furlan can peek. And then Furlan's going to molly back sight. So this does make sense, but... yeah. I don't know. I feel like I would have been more happy if he mollied closet. That's obviously like a team call. That's not necessarily on him. I feel like I would have been more happy with him mollying closet, and then you just kind of fight the guy. Like the guy tons spots the guy back plat, and if he's there, then you know you can play around that. Or even if the guy tons spots back plat, and because I think you can see. Well, if they're looking down, you can't see their head. But if they're on the back wall, can't you see their head no matter what? And if they're not on the back wall, you can see them from window. Yeah, I'm not sure. Because if he had mollied closet, then he could have gone in with PHR in through door and traded on him. And PHR with 25 health isn't very likely to get a kill, you know, but I don't know. All right, so he's finally back at Game Helper. That's where your opper belongs. This is why having a double op setup is quite nice on Dust 2. It's so strong, because if you have no opper mid, then this type of walkout mid is just extremely strong, right? Where you, not that you walk all the way out mid, but you do what they did there, where you walk out mid until you're close, and then you throw a smoke, and there's so little reaction time from the CTs. It's so easy to collapse on that B site, and no rotate can help at all, so you really get a true 5v2 on the B site, right? And that's if they're not afraid of having an opper in middle at all. So, but then if they're not afraid of having an opper car, then they can kind of like be pretty confident, aggressive up cat. So there's no real solution there other than having two ops. But it looks like Illuminar are not playing two ops like at all, I think. So this is the peak that I was kind of more looking for. On the round 10 when he had the op for the first time, which is like the dry peak. You make it seem like, because the T's, like when Illuminar hadn't thrown utility long, the T's had gone for long control, kind of delayed with very little utility already. So it makes sense for Ultimate to try and cover that by sometimes being here with an op. So he's going to pivot out of the car position, which is fine. But now he's going to end up... This is so risky to actually have both players move back up. They definitely could have got... I mean, it looks like they didn't get caught, but they kind of did get caught, right? Because Ultimate wasn't set up by the time that... long play actually came in. If he was set up, he'd be much more able to deal with this. And yeah. I mean, I can see exactly why they did this. But it is, like, very risky. And then here he's just got to wait for his teammate's flash. I think that's all it is. Like, maybe he's just disoriented, and he's like, because he's disoriented, he just ends up peeking out kind of accidentally. I think he's just got to like like you see the whole T side is blind by that flash, right? That flash would have absolutely destroyed... I mean, it did absolutely destroy them. And then Ultimate could have retaken all of the control he lost by repeating off of that. But maybe in that case, he's probably thinking not that there's 5 players there, right? He's probably thinking more that, like, the player's jumped in a pit, and maybe if he gets the repeak off quickly, he can catch the player before he's actually set up in pit. But I think in that case, you probably just have to wait for the reflash. But this is the problem. Like, when I do demo reviews, right? Patreon.com/VooCSGO. When I do demo reviews, I tell people not to send me games where they did really good or really bad. Because if you do really good, you also have... There's a word for this, and I'm not sure exactly what the word is, but I call it kind of like success tilt. It's like a version of tilt where you're not doing plays that you would normally do. And so it's like, I'll tell you like, oh, you shouldn't be doing that. And it'll be, the answer will be, oh, yeah, I know I shouldn't be doing that. And then it's like, okay, so then why did you send me this demo? You're doing stuff that you know you shouldn't be doing, and you know it without me telling you because you were just having an amazing game, right? And that feels like a couple of the plays being made here are legit like plays where it's like Ultimate's just, I'm feeling really good right now. I feel like I'm hitting every shot, so I'm just going to play, you know, hyper aggressive and very confident that they're going to hit those shots. Here's the retake. Missed the volley is unfortunate. The flash was like well timed. This teammate went in with it. You could argue he should have mollied then flashed, but actually there's no argument for that, because if he should have mollied then flashed, his teammate needed to be more delayed, and he threw exactly what he needed to do. And there's nothing wrong with flashing then mollying. I'm just making up reasons to question the play and then reaffirm the play. I'm trying to answer the questions that I feel the viewers might have that they probably don't have. Okay, so that you did see the double op last round, and you can kind of see why it does become problematic, because you have a double op. It becomes pretty hard to hold the mid to B split. This is, once his teammate dies, once Furlan dies, he kind of, that's almost a play where you're like, is that like what you're talking about with success tilt or whatever? No. Once Furlan dies there, he doesn't really have too much of an option. I think he basically just has to, he doesn't have to drop, but if he doesn't drop, his team is pretty much losing that round. So dropping makes a lot of sense. The only other option is if he had a player that was rotating back from long, he could have that player make contact, then he drops, right? Because he really should, with no he really should be dying there. But at the same time, he might be thinking, like, once they get that kill, what most T sides are going to do is they're going to drop a smoke CT, right? They're gonna smoke it off right after, because there's no reason to continue that fight when you get that first kill. You can just immediately pivot into a B hit, right? And just taking B. You know there's probably only one player there. So he might have even just been expecting that they were going to smoke that off. So he has to drop pretty quickly if he wants to actually make contact and give his team a chance. Kind of a unfortunate but necessary play, right? You know you're kind of fucked if they're posted on you, but you're hoping they're not. Oi! Okay, I thought he was actually about to just win his team that round instantly. Gets spammed back by NPL and destroyed. Yeah, okay, he ends with 43 kills. I thought, for some reason, I read it as 48 when I first saw it. Really nice game by Ultimate, but I want to take a look at another game of his. I'll probably do another review to look at a game where not that he does badly, but a game where he's just not having, like, hitting every single shot, you know? Where he's having a slightly more like a B game type game, right? Or a C game or something.